we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon again, everyone. I am Emily Lawson, Director of Education and Certification for the American Staffing Association. Welcome to today's program. Our program today is brought to you by Clearly Rated. Before we do get started, just a very quick housekeeping announcement for those of you who hold an ASA credential. Today's program does qualify for 1 hour of CE. Just submit your CE through the online CE submission form anytime after this program. We also are pre-approved by SHRM. Contact ASA for that program ID number. So throughout today's program, ask questions, engage with other attendees. We have lots of options for you. You could type right into the Q&A box to ask questions for our panel today. And of course, chat with your colleagues and other attendees using that chat panel. Everything can be found at the bottom of your Zoom window. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Richard Wahlquist, ASA's President and CEO. Thank you, Richard.
Well, thank you, Emily, and thanks to all of you for joining us here on our third quarter's State of the Industry podcast. And again, thank you to Clearly Rated, our sponsor. Be hearing more from their founder, Eric, in just a couple of moments. So last week was National Staffing Employee Week. I hope you all know that this is an annual event that celebrates the contributions of the millions of temporary and contract workers who work for staffing and recruiting companies like yours across the United States. Now, most of you know we have always characterized these individuals as the unsung heroes of the American workforce. But over the past 18 months, we've seen some truly heroic acts from temporary and contract workers who've been on the front lines of essential supply chains, from healthcare workers to IT professionals, to workers who've been part of essential supply chains ensuring the uninterrupted flow of goods and services to all of America. We're not done yet. Just this past Sunday afternoon, the former mayor of New Orleans and the current CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, reached out to ASA and me to see if our industry could help out with some of the cleanup operations that are much needed right now in New Orleans. And they're likely going to go on for several weeks, several months. What we heard from Mark and then city officials was that New Orleans has only been able to staff 25% of open positions related to the cleanup and recovery. Well, of course, our answer was yes. We'd be delighted to help in any way that we can. But I told Mark on Sunday and city officials yesterday morning, it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be easy to find the people that they're looking for, especially some of the skilled heavy equipment operators. But you all know that. As I speak with industry veterans from 20 and 30 plus years in this business, I continue to hear that most of them have never had more open orders than they've had over the past 12 months. And most of them have never experienced something that's come to be labeled as ghosting, something in our business for years we've always called no calls, no shows. And it's epidemic, and it's not just our industry, but nothing makes a client less happy when on Monday morning they're expecting 60 or 100 temporary and contract employees, and they end up with 6 or 10. We're going to be talking about client satisfaction and client expectations during the course of this particular webinar, and get some real insights from Eric and today's featured guest. Well, we're unhappy as well. We don't like to have all of those open orders. We don't like not being able to fulfill client needs and expectations and leave business on the table. But we know there are about 11 million jobs in the United States that employers just can't fill, and including the employers in our industry. We're in the midst of a historic economic comeback, but at the same time, we've got the lowest labor force participation rate in decades. And all the smart boys and girls, the economists, the policymakers, investors are all wondering, where are all of the workers? We know that at the height of the pandemic, we had more than 23 million Americans who were without work. So many of those jobs have come back, but again, we've got 11 million job openings. So top of mind now for businesses everywhere of all kinds is, what will our human capital strategy need to look like as we're coming out of the pandemic and getting back to a new normal, or as I like to call it, a better normal? We believe that that new human capital strategy is going to be clearly much more worker-centric, much more talent-centric. It's going to have flexibility. It's going to have hybrid work and lifelong learning otherwise known as career development at its core. And we think that these are great opportunities for the industry, also great challenges. We're confident that our industry is going to play an increasingly important role, providing needed flexibility in employment for workers and to employers, our clients at the same time. And our members are going to be involved in very significant ways in the upskilling and reskilling of the American workforce. In addition, we are going to continue to help advance equity and inclusion within our own organizations and with the clients that we serve, as we all work together to create a better, fairer, and more employed America. So we're focusing on opportunities inside of all of your companies now. You're probably beginning some of your strategic planning for the year ahead. Annual conferences like Staffing World, which we kick off next week, have long been considered to be a cornerstone event for business executives trying to plan strategy. And this year is probably going to be more important than ever before. It's going to be the first in-person ASA meeting that we've hosted since our Executive Vision program in January of 2020. And there's a lot of pent-up demand for all of us to get together with all of you. We're going to forge new partnerships. We're going to share innovations. We're going to imagine the future. We're going to touch on trends, including agility, technology, talent optimization, culture, flexibility, resiliency, social innovation, the importance of safety, and the way we navigate and deal with regulation. You're going to hear from Stephen Dwyer in just a couple of moments about some of our new challenges and opportunities. So with that, once again, welcome. I'm looking forward to seeing so many of you in Denver at the Gaylord Rockies. It all kicks off next Monday and Tuesday with some pre-con events on Monday and Tuesday, and then the convention itself opens up on Tuesday, and you will be safe. We are deploying state-of-the-art COVID safety protocols to ensure that everyone has a good experience on site and when they get back home. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce our webinar's moderator. He's a very, very good friend. He's the industry's leading talent and client engagement expert and the founder and CEO of ASA Corporate Partner, Clearly Rated. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Richard. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the intro. I'm excited to talk through some of the things that we have on the agenda today. But most specifically, I'm excited by who I'm joined on this webinar. Stephen Dwyer, Chief Legal and Operating Officer for ASA, is going to give us that legal update. I'm going to talk through some of the latest research. And then we're going to bring it all together and try to actually make it actionable with some pragmatic real world advice. And for that, I'm thrilled to have Stacey Lane, Chief Operating Officer for the Staffmark Group, joining us. We'll talk a little bit more about her and introduce her to the show to get her kind of reflection on some of the things that we're talking about from a legal and a research standpoint there. So with that, I want to just jump right in. And some of the research I'm going to start with is some of the industry research conducted by ASA. If you're not going to this data dashboard on americanstaffing.net, you're really missing a huge opportunity here. We've got this really the best, like right now, real-time view as to what's happening in the industry right now. My favorite of these is the ASA Staffing Index. When that's published, it's about the data is about a week old. You'll see that get picked up. It gets used by the Wall Street Journal. It gets used by a lot of the business publications. I've seen it in Forbes and I believe Fortune as well. And because it is really one of the best real-time indicators of what the overall economy is doing. So you can see that data there, as well as the latest data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, BLS data, as well as the quarterly, really all-encompassing research project. One shameless plug on ASA's behalf: if you're not participating, if your firm's not participating in these surveys, then you're only getting sort of the top level, which is really important. But there's a whole report that goes beyond this, looks at it by sector, looks at it by some of the other underlying metrics there. So and it's free to anybody that participates. So it's one of the easiest ways to get current actionable information on our industry. I highly recommend it. When we look at Q1, we had 2.7 million. That was down slightly from 2020. But now when you look at Q2, we brought that back dramatically, right? 2.6 million people average daily employment. That's up 27% versus Q2 last year. Q2, I'll show you a little bit in the staffing index data, but we hit a low as an industry in about the second week in May of 2020. And so that was right square within that Q2 window. And you can see that start to come back. The Q3 numbers will come back really strong, I suspect, as well, as we were, still really pretty much down in that negative area for most of Q3 last year as well. New assignments are coming up. So the other thing that we track is the number of new starts. So we're seeing, new assignments came up a bunch in Q1 and Q2. They've been, really kind of about even, down a little bit. That is not not demand constrained, but rather supply constrained, as Richard pointed out, and as everybody in the chat was very quick to add on to. One of my favorite things to look at is that ASA staffing index, and what you can see there is the trailing 4-week average. And congratulations on 558 days of COVID-19. That's actually where we're at as an industry, going back to that March timeframe. You can see how we dropped off really dramatically. And I'm going to show you another slide that kind of shows this even better, but we didn't stay down here very long. And as I pointed out, that second week in May was the bottom for most people. We came back, we take a dip that we always take every year. We take in that January timeframe, and we've had really consistent growth, even though, again, that's starting to top out a little bit because of the constraint on supply. But I think it's really interesting when we look at, sort of month zero and going out on 2008 to 2010, you can see the staffing index went down, and we stayed down for a really long time, and then the comeback was super gradual, and it's pretty encouraging when you look at what has happened so far from that same point, right? So we went down way quicker. But look how little time relative we actually spent at that bottom, and look how quickly we've actually been able to come back in terms of employment for the industry. So we have some headwinds, we have some challenges, but we also have some pretty amazing opportunities. And then another way to look at it is just looking at the year-over-year change. So this is the percentage difference from the prior year. And you can see in 2008, we were slightly positive territory, and then we went negative, and we went negative all the way down into December, and in fact, all the way to about July of 2009. Now in 2020, what people don't really realize is that we were down those first 3 months. We were negative year over year compared to 2019 before the pandemic ever hit. And then you could see that drop was really quick, and we were down significantly. And then we dug all the way out of it, which I've never seen in this industry, even tracking back historically, to dig out that quickly, which was pretty amazing to see. And then again, you could see in 2021, we were really flying. And then now, we've got tougher comparables as the year goes on, and we also have that supply constraint. But when you look at employment, we're still up over 20% year over year compared to the prior year there as well. So a couple things, when we look at this, staffing companies are really optimistic about the next few months, expecting third quarter revenue to grow 21% year to year, projecting an expansion at 20% for the full year. And that actually looks to be a pretty accurate representation based on what we're seeing in the employment data so far, and recognizing that will correlate really strongly with the revenue piece. A couple of things to really look at, and I've got some data that I'll share in a minute on this as well. But according to the latest data from ASA and their candidate sentiment pulse survey, 80% of candidates, both active and passive, foresee working for a new company in the next 12 months. 69% find working remotely more desirable than at an office or other on-site location. I think that this is the year of the hybrid work environment, and people are really trying to figure out what that means to them. Does that mean a little bit of flexibility? Does that mean a lot of flexibility? Does that mean no office? Does that mean a little bit of office? And this is a real opportunity for us to help lead our clients in the right direction, helping them understand that part of this war for talent that we're in is now being defined by flexibility, and a big part of the flexibility is the ability to work remote at least some of the time. Certainly not all sectors are likely to be able to experience that in the same way, but certainly for some of the professional engineering, scientific, technical positions, we're going to see a real movement continuing to that remote work as that becomes second only to compensation in terms of the importance for the American workers today. There's a lot of masking anxiety. 57% of the US adults said that they believe that we need to be wearing masks in the workplace even after being vaccinated. And you can see that differs depending on people's background and experiences, their ethnicity. And you see that this also differs if you have kids at home that can't be vaccinated. Parents were significantly more likely to feel that way than non-parents. And so there's a big difference there as well. We have a real paradox, the vaccine privacy paradox. The majority of us believe that we have a right to know if our coworkers have been vaccinated, and we also don't want our coworkers to know if we've been vaccinated. So this is an age-old dilemma where we want to know about everybody else, but we want to protect our own privacy. And that's one of the many things that people are going to have to navigate as they bring back to work as a part of that. And again, that differs a little bit based on age as well, and I think perceived risk there as part of that piece of it as well. So let's go through a couple of other things that I think are really interesting here. And this is just looking at data from the BLS Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. It's called the JOLTS survey, and it's the unemployed persons per job opening. And what's fascinating to me on this is that we took about 11 years to recover fully from the last recession, and we have done that now in less than 20 months, and in fact in about 12 months we've recovered all of that same sort of ratio that we have, and in fact once again we're at a spot where we had never historically been in over 20 years, which is that we have more unemployed people, we have more job openings than we have unemployed people to fill those job openings. So that's a number that really kind of gives us, to me, this is one of the best metrics that gives us a sense as to how tight that labor market actually is. And then you can see here too, the total quits by month. And what we see here is, almost nobody was quitting their job as we went into the pandemic. And now almost nobody's getting fired. In fact, 69% of all separations are people quitting their job as opposed to being let go or laid off. And the sheer number of people quitting their job, over nearly 4 million a month quitting their jobs is the highest level since they started tracking this over 2 decades ago. So we have some really positive news when we look at this on the buyers of staffing services. What happens a lot of times when we come out of a pandemic is this industry actually does really well. Because it's the equivalent of sort of being punched in the nose and lamenting the fact that we didn't have the flexibility. So not only are we sort of the bridge as people get more confident and bringing back workers before they maybe bring back full-time, traditionally employed in-house workers, but we also see that people gain some flexibility from their staffing firm relationships. And coming out of each of the last 4 recessions, including I think this one, we see people really desire to hold on to some of that flexibility. So we're seeing a real increase in the belief that hiring a remote workforce is important. 74% said that they believe being able to size up or down quickly is more important than before. And then 64% of the organizations surveyed, and this was done as part of our research with CareerBuilder and ASA, and this was done earlier this year. Even then, 64% said that it was hiring is more difficult than it was just 6 months prior. So we have a big difference there. We're talking a lot about customer experience here, and what we have and what we noticed during this pandemic, conducting surveys for over 300 different staffing firms, is that actually a lot of firms did really well, and their clients rated them, actually stronger than they did before, because they recognized that with adverse circumstances, they still were really being taken care of. And I'll show you some of the actual MPS trend numbers there as a part of that. However, there are some gaps, right? So we asked buyers, did service decline with your primary staffing firm since the start of the pandemic? And about half of them said that was the case. We asked staffing execs if they thought that their ability to service clients had declined, and only 28% of them said that they thought that the service had declined in relation to the pandemic. Similarly, we asked if deadlines were sliding more since the pandemic started. 52%, the same number, said that hiring managers at the primary staffing firm had some deadlines that really slid, and staffing executives said only 26% of them, about 1 in 4, said that was an issue at their firm. And then when we transitioned remotely, only 18% of staffing execs said that they were less equipped in a remote setting to handle their client needs, whereas again, 52%, just over half, said that that their primary staffing firm was less equipped. So we do see some change and trends there as well. As many of you know, we measure utilizing Net Promoter Score. So how likely is a client to recommend you? That score can go from -100 to +100. If you're in positive territory, that means that you have more promoters as an industry than detractors. And if you have a negative score, you have more detractors than promoters, which is not a good place to be. Sort of in the 0 to 30 is pretty average, and you can see kind of how we've gone. This is the last recession we had, and then you can see we took the biggest gains sort of as part of this recession, which is an important message for us to remember, which is to say that as we go into these moments where we have a lot of stress about revenue and protecting revenue, we tend to do better on the client service side of things. So let's talk about what we're seeing work, and give a little bit of insight into what we're seeing across those 300 accounts. The first of which is more important now than ever to really set expectations, and also turn away bad orders. Some of our best service providers, when I'm talking to their leaders, they're saying, hey, we recognize early on, and we're really trying to empower our teams. If you have an order that's not going to be possible to fill, dismiss that order from the start. Don't put it into the system. Don't have it be a part of this. Don't have it be a distraction. Don't do a little bit on all the orders. Do a lot on the orders that you can fill, and set the expectations accordingly. And that's one of the key areas that I think you can help to offset some of this. If you have somebody that's not competitive from a salary standpoint, that's not competitive from a work environment standpoint, that's not an order you should be working on, because getting more orders is not the problem right now. It's filling the orders that we have. It's really the right fit at the right time at the right cost, right? That's what we're always trying to do, but now it's even more important than before. And so what that means is we have to really have our teams paying attention to those job recs, challenging and consulting early on in those job recs. If you do it early on, it's consulting. If you do it after you've had a hard time filling the job rec, it's making an excuse from the perception of the client. So make sure that you're really managing those expectations, and doing what you can to get that right fit as we're going through here. We're seeing a lot of technology investments, and that's not just our industry, it's across other industries as well, as people have looked at the importance that's being placed now on their digital footprint and how they're servicing from a remote standpoint, their inability to attend a lot of events. That's just now starting to come back. And you're seeing a lot of the investments, but the best investments we're seeing are the ones where they are making investments to remove low value, high frequency work and replacing it with high touch, high value connections between recruiters and candidates, and between account managers and the clients as well. So don't just replace technology to try to get more efficient. Use it as a way to tighten and improve that relationship with your clients and with your talent as well. The other aspect that we're seeing is that we have to decrease that time between listing and acting. We've had more people this year than ever before that have started to look at our automated surveying solutions, getting feedback at different points throughout that candidate journey, recognizing that if they can minimize turnover of talent even a little bit, that they're placed on assignments, has a dramatic impact on not just their revenue and their growth, but also their gross margins as a part of that. So those are a few of the things that we're seeing work from a customer experience standpoint. I want to bring in now Stephen Dwyer, who's the Senior Vice President, Chief Legal and Operating Officer for ASA. We've had a chance to work together for well over a decade. Stephen's one of the brightest people in the space. He's my go-to when I have questions, not just even legally, but around what's happening and what are some of the current trends that are a part of that. So it's my honor to bring in Stephen Dwyer. And Stephen, what's going on that should be on people's radar from a legal standpoint?
Thanks, Eric. Always a pleasure to be with you, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to speak about in the next few minutes two issues that are really topical. The first of which really goes to one of the topics that Eric just discussed, and that is the ability to hire or the scarcity of candidates. And both of these issues, COVID vaccine issues and joint employment, obviously implicate clients. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I'd like to talk about what is probably the number one question that we, the ASA legal team, are getting from all of you, our members. And that is to say, what is the President Biden's declaration on September 9th with respect to mandatory vaccines or testing? What does that mean? Will it really happen? When will it happen? And what does it mean for our ability to attract candidates? What I'm referring to is September 9th, the President set forth a six-pronged plan for addressing COVID-19 in society, one of those prongs was a mandate that all employers with 100 or more employees would have to impose mandatory vaccines or a weekly testing requirement on employees. Let me stop right there. So President Biden directed OSHA to come up with what we call an ETS, an emergency temporary standard. And OSHA is expected to do that in the next several months. We do not have a firm time frame for you all. We have reached out to OSHA to try to get more information. Our best guess is that we will see it towards the end of October, perhaps early November. The next issue that comes up is, okay, what about employees? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about temporary employees in that head count? And the answer is most likely yes. We have to wait until we see the OSHA ETS, but most likely temporary workers will count in head counts and also be covered by this mandate vaccine or weekly testing. Why do we say most likely yes? Because under every other employment law and workplace safety law, temporary workers must be counted. Another question that we often get is, well, will our clients also have to count temporary workers? And again, the answer is, without knowing what the ETS exactly will say, we think they probably will. Both the staffing firm and the client will probably have to count in the head count temporary workers. Clients, if they are joint employers, almost certainly will need to do so. It is unclear at this point who will pay for actual testing, whether it's going to be the government or employers. What seems to be clear is President Biden, in his remarks, is that said that paid time off for testing will be required, and that paid time off will have to be imposed on employers. They will have to foot the bill. So we know that much. If we could go back to the prior slide, please. Thank you. There's no opportunity to comment before the ETS will be published. It's an emergency temporary standard. And therefore, unlike most OSHA rules, which are published and business groups such as ASA would have an opportunity to file written comments, we don't have that opportunity under the ETS expedited process. So we just need to wait and see, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on one's point of view, see once it's published what it actually says, and it will probably go into effect immediately, with one caveat. There are numerous groups that are talking about court challenges, to challenge it on the basis of it potentially being unconstitutional or beyond OSHA's authority. What do I mean by that? Well, some legal scholars are saying OSHA can't mandate that employers pay for testing or pay for paid time off. They also say that the 100 or more employee cutoff is an arbitrary number and therefore doesn't have a rational relationship under OSHA's rulemaking authority. And then finally, they often will argue or may argue that under an ETS, the government, OSHA, has to show that employees are in grave danger. Some legal scholars think that this ETS may be challenged by saying, look, COVID's been around for a while. Why are you doing it now? Nothing has dramatically changed such that employees are in any more danger than they previously would. If you were to ask me whether these legal challenges will succeed, I will honestly tell you that I don't know. Legal scholars on both sides say the ETS will be overturned, and others say it will be upheld. What I do know is the following. It may be a mess, folks. You may have various lawsuits filed in various jurisdictions, with some courts enjoining the ETS, in other words, suspending the effective date, saying it's not going to go into effect right away. You may have other jurisdictions saying, no, the ETS is valid, we're going to uphold it, and therefore it's going to go into effect right away. And ultimately, this may be resolved by the US Supreme Court. So we need to stay tuned. There's a lot of developments that have to come. Now, you might ask, what's the business community's reaction to this right now? Well, we've seen the major trade groups, the National Retail Federation, for example, the Business Roundtable, the US Chamber of Commerce, basically taking a wait and see approach, not coming out for or against it, expressing concern that it could have a damper on labor supply, to Eric's discussion earlier, and that may be the case, but we just need to wait and see to know more details. And certainly we will be on top of it, and when we know, we will let you all know as well. So putting aside for a moment the potential for an OSHA mandate, many of you are asking us, well, we're getting mandates from our clients. That is to say, only send us temporary workers who are vaccinated. Is this lawful? What can we share with our clients? What can we ask our temporary workers? And for that, I would refer you to the EEOC guidance that's on your slide. There's a link there. You can certainly download the slides and click on that link. And it talks about mandatory vaccination, which is certainly permissible if you choose to do it. It is certainly permissible to do it for only candidates for certain clients. You can do it for your internal employees only, for your temporary employees only. You can do it at your discretion with some caveats, and you probably know these by now. Number one, if someone is disabled under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have to make a reasonable accommodation for that person, perhaps allowing them to work from home, not be around other people, segregate them in a workplace. Or number two, if someone has a sincerely held religious belief, you have to make an accommodation for them. You need to check state law about this. An interesting development just happened in New York where the administration said if you are working in a healthcare capacity, you have to be vaccinated. And under the New York law, they did not allow for religious accommodations. Someone sued, the court said, no, you need to allow for religious accommodations in New York, and they stayed that law, they enjoined it. So a lot of moving parts here on the federal and state level. The next question that we'll often get is, can we share vaccine information with clients? And the answer is no. Under the ADA, that's protected information. You need to segregate it, put it in a separate file from an employee's personnel file. You can't, waivers of liability, if you disclose this information to a third party, probably not effective. The best way, if the client asks about vaccine information about a candidate, is to get the candidate's consent to share it with the client. That's the most effective way to insulate you from liability. If you do an attestation that all candidates who you supply to a client are vaccinated in response to the client's requirement, probably a middle ground in terms of risk, try to get the individual's consent to share vaccine status or information with your client. Next slide, please. Okay, the last topic very quickly that I wanted to mention is joint employment. Here we go again. The Biden administration has rescinded the legal test for joint employment under the Fair Labor Standards Act. President Trump promulgated a simple test. It was 4 factors. It's really easy to follow. Everyone loved it. The administration, the ASA supported it. Clients loved it. Staffing clients was simple, as easy to understand. Biden administration has rolled that back. It's rescinded in early October, and they haven't promulgated a new legal standard yet as to when a client will be a joint employer. Ultimately, the substantive impact of this, probably negligible under any legal test. Trump test, forthcoming Biden test, doesn't matter. If the client supervises a temporary worker, they're going to be a joint employer. So the potential effect is more psychological. You might see a lot of articles and clients might say the sky is falling. The sky is not falling. Things have not changed. It's not a bad thing to be a joint employer. They always have been. They probably always will be. We have an updated joint employer toolkit on our website to assuage client concerns. And of course, you can refer clients to us if they are concerned. And finally, talk with your law firms. Tell them not to write these incendiary articles where the sky is falling, because it really is not. So with that, Eric, a couple of topics that I ran through very quickly, but I certainly want to turn it back over to you to interview our guest today.
Thank you, Stephen. Important information, and unlike your beloved New York Football Giants, you finished as strong as you started. Well done. At this point, I could not be happier to invite in Stacy Lane, Chief Operating Officer for the Staffmark Group. Stacy and I have actually worked together for 13 years. Her and the Staffmark Group were very early into adopting Net Promoter Score and really a very CX focused entire go-to-market strategy. Stacy is part of Staffmark Group's one of the largest staffing companies in the U.S. She's in charge of the strategic direction, business operations, and the execution for 8 of the major staffing brands. She's a real driving force behind Staffmark's transformation to data-driven organization. But what I love is that they're always people first, right? And their strategy has always been betting on people first to really influence the customer experience. And by customer experience, I mean the clients and the talent that they place. She's got over 25 years of staffing industry experience. She's been named to the SIA Global 150 Women in Staffing for the most influential women in our industry 2 different times. And she's just a lovely human being. So Stacy, welcome. And thank you for taking part in today's conversation.
Thank you, Eric. I'm excited to be here, and it's good to see you. It's been a while.
I know. It's and we talked about staffing world. I'm so excited to actually see a few of the people on the call here in 3 dimensions. I will warn you, I haven't talked to people in 3 dimensions for a year and a half. So if I do see you at the conference and I stumble all over myself, I'm just getting my sea legs again.
Duly noted.
So you've had such an awesome career in this industry, and you continue to do, there's a handful of people, not a handful, there's more than a handful, but there are some people that in my opinion, just do it right. And they build the type of firm that influences the type of industry that we all want to have and be proud of. You've seen client expectations change over the years. What's different now? What's changed? What hasn't changed from your perspective and what you're seeing from the role that you have?
Okay. Yeah, I have been in the staffing industry for a long time, and our industry has definitely changed and evolved very significantly over the years, but I think it's also stayed the same fundamentally, and that our clients want us to identify top talent to help their business grow and thrive. They want us to solve their problems. Clients are much more educated and overall about our industry, and they see us as staffing providers as part of their workforce solution and overall talent acquisition plan. I think clients expect their staffing providers now more than ever to really be experts, trusted advisors, consultants on many of the business issues. When I travel around, I meet with clients, I get asked a lot for advice when I'm meeting with clients. Technology also plays a really significant role in our business, and clients really want to know how we're leveraging technology to fill their jobs more quickly with the right talent and create efficiencies on the applicant to placement cycle time. And clients are also looking for creativity, not only with talent attraction, but also with onboarding programs, training, upskilling, even different pricing methodologies that can create winning outcomes all the way around. And our mission to match a qualified candidate to the right job really hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And I really still think this is our greatest responsibility. Just how we go about doing that has evolved. Social media, advertising diversification through multi-channel methods, growth of consumer apps, but we still acquire a good percentage of our applicants through referrals, and that hasn't changed over the years.
Yeah.
Clients want to stay engaged with our talent much more frequently and through multiple methods, because I really believe that turnover is a shared responsibility. It's our job as an industry to get them there, but it's a collective responsibility to keep them there if that's what's in everyone's best interest. And engagement is tricky because it's constantly changing, especially with a multi-generational workforce that wants to engage in different ways. We know that 50% of the millennial workforce prefers text messaging and baby boomers not so much. Clients, I think, want to hold our industry to a higher standard around issues of compliance and expect to be well educated, that we've got good processes in place to manage this. And then I would say, finally, this rise in the gig economy has changed a lot of things. Clients, they need to understand now that employees have more choices than they ever have before. Yeah. And that they might not want to work full-time hours or mandatory overtime in some cases, or that our talent want to shop around and select their own job. That applicants rely heavily on reviews to make decisions. And so reputation management is going to be important. And it all has to be done really fast and through your cell phone if you want to be successful. If we're going to be really effective partners with clients in today's staffing marketplace, I think we've got to be consultants, educators, come from a data-driven place and coach them on making changes and adjustments for the mindset of today's complex workforce.
Yeah, I think it's so right. And just a reminder to our audience that if you have questions for Stacy or any of the rest of us, we will have some time for Q&A at the end of this. So please type them into the Q&A tab or into the chat, either one, and we'll capture those. So you hit on something that I love, which is the consultative aspect of it. And I try to remind people as I'm talking to them, different staffing firms, like at any given time, that recruiter or that account manager that's in front of a hiring manager has probably hired more people in the last 12 months than anybody else that they're talking to. And yet I think a lot of times we don't actually do a good job of communicating sort of the advice piece. We don't have the confidence to come in there as the true experts and counsel and be that trusted advisor. How do you go? I get that you can go and have that conversation, right, with your career and the things you've done. How do you take a recruiter or an account manager that's not as experienced, maybe not as confident? How do you get them to be better, consistently better about providing that consultative feedback?
Well, I think that, first of all, you have to get educated. You have to know your market. You've got to be a student of the industry, which is interesting. It's the minute that you know something, it's almost obsolete. Yeah. And so I think part of it is providing our teams with information, data, and then it's around confidence. And it's usually not a one-time conversation, Eric. For me, you don't go and meet with a client and provide information or perspective or demographics or recommended suggestions and everybody says thumbs up. It's usually a complex decision-making team, and you've got to get buy-in from multiple stakeholders. But with our teams, I think just reinforcing the knowledge of what's out there and that we are the experts, and they rely on us to come to them and make decisions because we have no motivation not to fill their jobs.
Right.
It's our sole revenue stream. And I remind clients of that all the time. I have no motivation to not fill your job. So we've got to figure out how to do that in the most effective way.
Yeah, we're on the same team. And the other thing that you said that really stood out to me is that applicants are looking at reviews and using that as part of their decision to take a job at a client. We don't directly control that, but it is part of our job to encourage them to understand that is a component of it. And I tell people, look, you should be doing that before you take them on as a client. If somebody has a terrible Glassdoor rating and it looks legit, they've probably earned it, which is going to make it really hard to fill their orders. And it's maybe not the kind of client that you really even want to be associated with. So yeah, that stuff matters to the firm as well as to the applicant. So we've had a lot of things change in the last now, I guess, close to 20 months. What's going to be, hold on and be a part of how we serve clients 5 years from now? And what do you think is going to kind of go back to sort of a pre-pandemic normal, if was even a thing?
Well, obviously COVID-19 pandemic has been horrible for a lot of people, but I also think it's propelled the staffing industry of the future and accelerated our ability to deliver our services despite adversity, despite obstacles. I mean, we had no choice but to figure it out. So it sort of moved to the top of the roadmap, and we had to embrace technology, but more importantly, adoption and utilization. And that is really the challenge, in my opinion. We had to get creative, working remotely to support our talent and clients, which wasn't an easy change in commercial staffing. And because that's never really been our operating model. As in the future, I think we're going to be better off. And we'll be more efficient with the expedited focus on technology and adoption as part of our core business processes. I expect permanent changes in the industry. I think the rise of remote jobs, I've already seen some of that in the chat, more flexible schedules, more automation. And I think that clients are going to look for us to solve new problems, some that are just now manifesting and some that we don't even know about yet. And I think that VMS and MSP engagements will continue to grow, because clients are going to want data, spend management, more resources, and a strong desire to get the best employees from their company. And I think these solutions drive this effectively. Staffing companies should also expect a strategy to support growth in all different sectors. And as Stephen mentioned, we have to navigate new safety protocols, legislation, how we keep people safe, which is a huge responsibility. And we're going to have to partner with our clients to develop resources and programs for our talent that drive flexibility, speed to placement, while acknowledging that the challenges that our talent face, which are really real: childcare, transportation, fear of being sick, inflation, and rising cost of goods. Those are real issues that I think are going to take some time to resolve and think through. And then I would say, finally, I think there's going to be an important demand from clients on initiatives to support diversity, equality, and inclusion for all. Our clients are going to look to us as their staffing providers to push these initiatives to the forefront, set mutual goals, collaborate on how we can improve, and make a difference to create a more diverse, accepting, and inclusive environment. And all that being said, I think we're still in the jobs and people business, and I don't think that's going to change. The fundamental responsibilities, like I said before, are not going to go away. It's just how we go about doing it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And would you agree with that? It also feels like how we define a successful placement has changed, right? It's expanded. So it used to be sort of match in time, and that's still critically important. Matter of fact, it's the #1 complaint we get from clients when we're looking at the survey data is, hey, the people you sent didn't meet my criteria, or it took too long. However, that criteria is getting more robust, right? And it's including a diverse slate of candidates. It's including candidates that have the right safety background and things along those lines. So I think that that's one of the big areas that we look at. And one of the things, Stacey, that you said that I thought was fascinating was when you talked about technology. I don't even know if you do this, but it's I think so telling as to why you guys have been successful with a lot of your technology investments. But you said every time you said technology, you said technology and adoption. Technology and adoption. And probably the biggest mistake that we see staffing execs make is that they're investing in the technologies, but not in the adoption. And ultimately, they're only getting a little way towards the promised land. So talk a little bit about the ideal role for technology and the role that adoption plays within that.
Yeah, adoption is challenging, and I'm so glad that you picked up on that. I didn't realize I was saying it, because it truly is. It's not easy to go out and buy or build or create technology, but getting people to use it is what's challenging. And I think for us at Staff Art Group, the initial impacts of COVID in the spring of last year, it allowed us an opportunity to step back and evaluate how we were doing business and what we could improve and what we were measuring, what our capacity was, and what expectations we had for future state operations. And it became really crystal clear for all of us that technology and adoption was going to play a bigger role going forward as a key service component while delivering our services remotely. And although we've been developing and implementing new technologies for years, we use this as a chance to double down on our efforts and our rollout speed. And that wasn't always great. And that was hard because maybe we weren't ready. And then sometimes people had a bad experience and we had to make some changes. But luckily, we have a really strong emphasis on strategic planning for new technologies on our IT roadmap. So we just accelerated and pushed it forward implementation. I think the role of technology in terms of how we serve our clients is around improving speed, efficiency, and automating manual processes. And you said this in the very beginning, and I loved it, so that our teams can focus more on high impact work, be more productive, and spend more time doing the things that they like, which is engaging with talent and clients. And what's interesting is there's also some fear around that. And I remind people, every time our industry has faced a major disruption on the technology front, so like when the job boards came out, or when VMS really started to accelerate within our business as a solution, it's always created more jobs and not less. And I don't really see this changing with technology. I think the role, technology comes in all shapes and sizes and functionality. Automating interview processes, both verbally and with video, can allow us to screen candidates 24/7, not just Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And we get to present our candidates faster to the clients. We don't need to travel as much as we did in the past.
Yeah.
With the access of Teams and Zoom, and we can conduct meaningful and engaging meetings, and we don't have to be in the same room, although it is nice. In fact, I think it's easier to get meetings with high-level decision makers now than it ever has been.
Yes.
And clients have format choices. They can submit staffing requisitions through an app. They have multi-channel communications through chat apps. They can access their own data at their time through labor management systems. And technology can also eliminate or minimize some of the manual hiring, the onboarding, the ongoing management processes around like orientation and performance feedback. And we've spent a lot of energy around client education and adoption and illustrating how technology is going to improve our services and not displace them. I know it was a long-winded answer, but I wanted to make sure I got it all in there.
I love it. I love it. I could, talk and ask you questions all day. I have one more, and then we have some questions in the Q&A tab that I'll bring back Stephen and Richard for as well. But the last question I want to ask you, one of the things I've been amazed at is the level of engagement that you all get around your client experience survey specifically. You guys do a great job on the talent side too, talent engagement, getting feedback on a regular basis, automated through our system. But the client side of it and getting that engagement across the field, talk a little bit about what you found works to help people pay attention to that client experience and treat it as a KPI just the same way they might, fills or gross margin or hours.
Yep. Well, I've learned over the years that what gets talked about and gets measured and gets managed, gets hyped, gets done. And I think it starts at the top. And I think this, one of the things that Staff Mark Group does really well is how we message the importance of the MPS survey. Now that starts with Gino, who's our CEO at Staff Mark Group, our field executive leaders, all the way through our frontline. I think Richard Walker said this, our frontline superheroes or unsung heroes in our branches and on-sites, everybody gets involved. We've got a really clear, consistent communication plan for both our talent and our client survey responses, and we report on this really consistently, and we drive the information to the fields. We're actually working on an integration with our ATS and our app platform right now to make it even easier for people to use. But fundamentally, I think the most important thing that we focus on is what we learn from the surveys. The continuous improvement that should be the outcome of the survey process. And early on, I got so hung up, Eric, in that score. And now it's around the important responsibility with what we do with the information that our clients and our talent share in the survey. Do we take that information and make improvements? Do we focus on the feedback and drive improvements on it that will ultimately manifest itself in the results and the scores if we're doing it right? And I think as a company, we've got overall action items and a framework for follow-up, but the last thing I'd say about that is, and I think you know this, the magic is that this whole process is owned entirely by the field organization. There's not a separate group that's not personally invested. The follow-up, the action items, the positive shout-outs from talent, the detractors, it's all handled within the business units and the field employees. We share best practices, but the program lives with the people that are closest to the talent, the clients.
Yeah, you're hitting on one of the biggest opportunities for most people doing a client satisfaction survey, which is to treat it less like a report card and treat it more like a client roadmap. Where the field organization, is taking action on it. I think that's so great. So we're to the Q&A portion, and the first, if we can bring back Stephen and Richard, the first question is for a Mr. Stephen Dwyer. How likely is there, or is there chatter around a carve out for employers who offer full-time remote work in terms of the vaccine mandate?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there is chatter that for fully remote workers, that is to say, remote workers who never come into the office and who do not physically engage with clients, don't do client visits or whatnot. OSHA, the Department of Labor, has suggested that there will be a carve out for those employees. Don't take that to the bank until we see, again, the ETS language. We can't count on anything, but I think that is the direction that they're headed. So I do think there'll be a carve out for those employees, but not for the employers generally, just for those fully remote employees.
Great. Question for Stacy. Which social media network do you think is the most successful in regards to recruiting potential clients, not candidates, clients?
I would say probably LinkedIn. And some of the other things that we're using that are bolt-ons, but that's from a client perspective. From a recruiting perspective, by far, Facebook.
Yeah. The option I wanted to add to that was none of the above, which is that I don't feel like those are good for cultivating relationships, but where I've actually seen client acquisition work best is when you take really tailored campaigns. If you're really good at call centers, tailor a campaign to call center, add in some thought leadership and some content, and really go after that group. That's the place where I think marketing and sales can work together and have a real field day. Last question across the board. I'm going to start with you, Richard, put you on the spot. Best work, if somebody's building a must-read list of books to get on their Kindle, what would you have them start with? What have you read recently that you really like?
Well, this is going to be a little bit self-serving, but I had a pre-conference speaker prep session about a week ago with our final keynote speaker, Rita McGrath. I kidded her and I said, you're absolutely prescient. She wrote a book called Seeing Around Corners, and picking up on some of the strategy from Andy Grove, she talks about strategic inflection points and how those can make or break a company and make or break an industry. So that one has been on my Kindle most recently. Highly recommended. She's a Columbia business professor. She knows our industry. She's excited about the opportunities. I'd start with that one.
Stephen, same question to you. I'm building a reading list. Where should I start?
Self-serving, everyday staffing today. Can't get any better information than that.
Perfect. Stacy, what about you? Have you read anything that's been particularly provocative lately?
I've got it right here. It's The Disruption Mindset by Charlene Lee, and around organizations, transformation and disruption, why some make it and why some fail. And she's just one of the finest business minds, and it's fantastic. There it is.
All right, I'm going to add mine to the list as we round this out. And mine's an audiobook, and it's not that I'm lazy or that I can't read, guys. I know that's exactly where Stephen's mind was going, but I can. But this is Malcolm Gladwell's new book. It's obviously available on your Kindle, but the audiobook is amazing. Pulls in actual interviews, and I believe it's called Speaking with Strangers or Talking with Strangers. It's a really good book. It's helps understand a lot of the inherent bias that we have in our lives across that board. It wasn't written specifically for that, but I think as anybody in this industry whose job is in part is to sort of judge people's ability to do another job, I think it's a fascinating book with that lens on as well. So one of the best that I've been a part of recently. With that, I just really want to thank all of today's participants. Really a wonderful webinar. Stacy, thank you so much. Stephen, Richard, as always, thank you so much. Just a quick shout out to Staffing World. It's never too late. Next week is where we're at. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. And if some of you can free it up and aren't already on the schedule, you should definitely go if you can. And last but not least, we're going to be getting a post-webinar survey. We do look at this feedback very closely, try to tailor the next SOTI webinars based on that, of which our actual next SOTI webinar is Tuesday, December 14th, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And I highly encourage people to register for that one as well. We'll continue to give you really the most important prevalent information from that quarter as it pertains to the staffing industry and what you need today. With that, thank you again, everybody, so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you at Staffing World.